following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Welcome to Gate City Chronicles. I'm Kevin Avard, your host. And today we have a special guest, and we have a historian on campus here, if you will. And I want to introduce Chris Daley. You're a historian, a lecturer.
Yes, I am.
And you came all the way from Cape Cod to be on Gate City Chronicles.
Yes, I did.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, welcome to the show.
I love New Hampshire.
Yeah, so do I. It's a great state. Actually, you've been lecturing here at the National Library.
Yeah, last year I did the Kennedy lecture, and I think the year before I did another one on another assassination, the Lincoln assassination. So I guess I'm a assassination historian.
Did they really find John Wilkes Booth?
Well, that's something that I always tell people is a lot of bunk. It was John Wilkes Booth.
It was,
yes, yeah.
There was I watched the History Channel there not too long ago, and there was they said that he got away and he got married
he ended up
again.
in Egypt, he was a mummy, yeah, all that stuff.
Yeah, he was a mummy, or that he married somebody else, and he ended up down in
So
Louisiana.
there's conspiracy theories with the Lincoln assassination as well. There's even a conspiracy that the elite in the North had him killed, believe it or not. That came out in the 70s, but you don't hear much about it anymore.
Yeah, and we were saying this off camera, but it seems to me that there are a lot of people that lie and make money off it, and there are people that will just put out a whole bunch of information just to muddy the waters. And
the same thing with the Kennedy assassination, like I was saying earlier. It's just layer of layer of layer, and a lot of it, like you say, is people that just want to put a book out, make some cash, and it's not really very credible. But you'll have somebody that reads that one book, and they know, well, this is what happened. I read an article or a book, and it's like, well,
or I saw the movie.
Need to do a little. Yeah, I saw the movie, which is the worst.
Right.
Because the movie was just an amalgam of all sorts of theories and whatnot. And
it's kind of like that lamb chops. This is the song that never ends. But is it important to know the history behind this, and how do you determine?
I think you have to understand the time period. It was the Cold War, and as we were talking about earlier, Kennedy took office, and immediately the Bay of Pigs happens. All these events happened, and he made himself quite a few enemies. And if you don't know that, he didn't just wake up one morning as president get killed. There was a chain of things that happened before he was killed.
And I heard that Johnson was bitter that he didn't get elected.
Oh, yeah.
And some people thought, well, maybe he had a part in it. Bobby was going after some of the mafia people,
right.
and so all that bringing into your perspective.
Those are some of the things, yeah.
Yeah. So and then you hear from there used to be a show, G. Gordon Liddy. I know you said it was
G. Gordon.
G. Gordon Liddy. And it was always somebody in the grassy knoll, and he was there, or something to that effect.
Right, right.
But there's one thing that I think a lot of people, if you fired a gun, any kind of gun,
right,
when you're shooting up or you're shooting down, it is a very tricky thing. You have to adjust, and of course, if you don't have sights, or if you have sights, and if the target's moving, and then if you have things in the way, 3 shots, bolt action.
And not a good bolt action rifle. It was a Mannlicher Carcano, which was a cheap knockoff of a higher grade weapon.
So when you start your lectures, where's the foundation of the lecture?
Well, I start off with basically, as I just said, the Cold War aspect. I go into how World War II had ended. Korea was in the rearview mirror. And now we have, this struggle between communism and free countries. And we have Cuba. And give a little background on Cuba, that it was run by a dictator named Batista. And that, you have the recipe for a revolution right there. You've got the ultra-rich in Havana with the gambling casinos and everything. Just outside, you've got dirt poor people, sugarcane farmers. And that was a perfect situation for communism. And in comes Fidel Castro. And a lot of people don't know originally, Castro could have gone either way. A lot of people were cheering him on in America. And when he got in, the U.S. kind of snubbed him. And he's like, well, if they don't want to help me out, I'll go with the other guy. And that was the Soviets. And once that happened, he became our mortal enemy.
Right, he was a perfect dupe.
So then we started with the Bay of Pigs invasion, which was actually, the genesis of that was within the Eisenhower administration. And Kennedy walked in and, his first day, when they get the briefing, was like, guess what? This is already in the works. And all the advisors said, oh, it's a slam dunk, and, we're going to go in there and we're going to start this uprising and Castro's going to be out. But he wasn't really given the full information. And as we know from history, they did the invasion, and they didn't have full air support. There was air support. A lot of people say Kennedy didn't provide air support. There was, but they didn't take out all the jets. And the people didn't rise up against Castro like we expected, and it was a debacle. And he made a lot of enemies with that. And he learned that his advisors, the CIA and naval intelligence and all these people, were kind of padding what happened. And he took revenge on them. One thing he said to one advisor, he said, I'm going to tear apart the CIA. I'm going to tear it into 1,000 pieces. Fired Allen Dulles, who was the head of the CIA. So there he's already got enemies in the CIA.
Was J. Edgar Hoover still around?
J. Edgar Hoover was around. He died during, I think, the Nixon administration. So he was still a powerful force.
Right. And did he play any kind of role as far as...
Well, he had a lot of dirt on the Kennedys. We know that, because they wanted to fire him. And he just walked in and threw one of his folders on the table and said, oh, look at this.
Do you know this girl, Maryland?
Yeah. He had recordings. He had films. Kennedy actually...
so this whole idea
going back to World War II, really.
Spying on elected officials is nothing new.
No.
I think this administration is probably taking it up to a different level.
Well, we've got different technology now.
Right.
It seems like everybody's being spied on
now. Now, a lot of people attribute the Vietnam War with Nixon, but it didn't start with Nixon.
No.
And I find that rather curious. It actually started back during the Kennedy.
It probably started, the genesis of it was starting during Eisenhower, and we really hadn't got full into it until Kennedy. At the time Kennedy was in there, we had advisors and some soldiers in there, and he saw that the Diem regime, which is the president at the time who wasn't really elected, was corrupt. He was Catholic because, the French Catholicized a lot of the Vietnamese, and was very biased against, the Buddhists. And there was a lot of friction there, and eventually Diem, just a short period before Kennedy was assassinated himself. Some people say Kennedy knew it was going to happen too. And he wanted to pull out, really. I can show you the National Security Action Memos where he actually was talking about withdrawing from Vietnam. But if you go back to Eisenhower warned of this military-industrial complex that we had developed, where we were developing all this war machinery, and where are we going to use it all?
I actually saw that clip not too long ago. I don't know if we used it on, I think Joe DeLeo was on one of our shows, and it had to do with the weather. But the Eisenhower was warning of something, and it had to do with the military complex, where it just, let's create a conflict so we can develop some more. And the Iron Man syndrome. If you've watched Iron Man, some of these little truths are thrown into some of the Hollywood movies.
And the nuances that you pick up if you know a little history.
Right. It's rather interesting. But then you have, obviously, everybody's talking about Vietnam, and Lady Bird made some money off that, and Johnson was he was really heavily into it. But getting back to the assassination, so now we have people in Cuba that hate our president. We had people in the CIA that
Well, the CIA is mad at him. The exiles that went in on the Bay of Pigs, the Cuban exiles, are mad at him. Now he's angered the military-industrial complex. Additionally, he angered the oil men because they had this tax break that they were getting, and he was going to cut it. And he angered the steel industry and the mob. The thing about the mob is, if you look at the history of the Kennedys, his father was up to his neck with these guys in Prohibition, and he had the connections. And I always say during my lecture, I say, I wonder if Daddy talked to the kids, because they went after those mobsters like rabid dogs. What they didn't realize is that I think Kennedy was elected in part because Daddy pulled some strings with certain elements within the mafia that were able to help him get over. It was a very close election with Nixon.
So what happens when you move the mob and you still have the same thing going on? What do you call that?
When you what?
Corruption. I'm just
corrupt.
It's kind of funny.
Organized crime.
Oh my God! Yeah, there's a guy
under any name.
There's a gentleman in New Hampshire. His name is Mike Gill. He said, you know, if you just get rid of the mob, you basically got rid of the middleman. You know, because they get the politicians and the judges. You know?
Right.
But you know, it's kind of scary. So basically, he's ticking off these people because he's not falling into this crony capitalism.
No, and part of the reason was he already had money. He was rich. He couldn't be bought off, and he was going to do what he thought was right. I think, for all his foibles, and we've read about all the the talk about him in his personal life. I think that he had some very what's the word?
Laudable ambitions.
Laudable, yeah. You could say he was not corrupt,
right? And
he wanted to do what he thought was right.
It's like Samson, right?
He was going up against the giant. Really.
He basically everywhere you turn. So you think the left hand was talking to the right hand, saying, "Look, we don't like this guy, Jack. What do we do?"
I think you could make a case for that.
How do we get Lee Harvey Oswald involved with this?
Okay.
And to take the heat.
You want this is my theory. And again, I said I'm not an expert. I'm more of I do lectures on other things. I classify myself as a buff. My theory is he was in the U.S. Marines. He was sent to Atsuki Air Base, which is in Japan. What a lot of people don't know is Atsuki had a CIA station right next to the base. Within a period of a year or so, he became fluent in Russian somehow, just by reading books. His fellow bunkmates said he was in and out of the barracks at odd times and would just disappear. And I think he was trained as a CIA operative. He was actually sent into Atsuki. There was a communist cell. He was in there with them, and then he started talking to his bunkmates about how he believed in communist philosophy, and he thought Marxism was the way to go. And you can even look on YouTube and see some videos of him talking about how he's a Marxist. But if you look at it, it's almost like he's just repeating what he was told, that he wasn't really a serious Marxist. And then after he's a Marine, he decides that he's going to defect to Russia. And he does this with $232 in his pocket, from Texas to the USSR. And nobody has been able to find out where he got the financing to get to Europe and get into the USSR. Well,
I guess that was a lot of money back then.
He ends up in the USSR, goes to the consulate, says, I want to defect. And he shows up on a Saturday, and he's told, well, you can't defect on a Saturday because of business hours. And then he never shows up again. So technically, he never defected. So anyway, about a year later, he spends all this time in Russia, this rabid communist. But later on, the communists came, and they said he never went to meetings. He never seemed to be involved. He was just, it was like he was just there as a show. The Russians thought he was nuts. And then he comes back here. My theory is that they put him into the USSR. He came back to the U.S. with, I guess today we'd call it street cred, to infiltrate communist cells within the United States as a double agent. And they knew that, and now, and you look at his background, his biography, he's the perfect patsy to set up. And I think that's what happened.
And, all right, so now we have, was there ever a conclusive ballistics
The ballistics, most of the bullets, well, you have the magic bullet that appeared at Parkland, and it supposedly fell out of Lyndon Johnson. It was on his stretcher. But if you do a little research, you find out that the orderly that was there when they found the bullet, it was actually on the wrong stretcher. It was on, there was a boy that came in shortly before the assassination. I think he got hit by a car, he fell off his bike or something. There was bloody sheets all over the place. And the bullet was on his stretcher, and there was not a mark on it. And if you know anything about rifles, you fire, it went through several bones, flesh. Just going through flesh, it should have been crushed, and it wasn't. So you have that one bullet, and then you have multiple fragments, and that's basically all you have to go by. So ballistics wasn't really that good. Another thing, if you want to talk about ballistics, when J.D. Tippit was killed, the officer that supposedly Lee Harvey Oswald was killed, there's something really stinky about that. When the officers got to the scene, they found shells on the ground. What does that tell you? Automatic weapon, it ejects. And they were automatic shells. They found Lee Harvey Oswald with a revolver.
Yes.
But they said that the shells could have fit in the revolver. But why would you shoot somebody with a revolver and then empty all the shells out? There's just all these little things.
That went really quick too. I mean, it wasn't like you had time to react. I mean, it was quick, bang.
Yeah,
I don't
bang,
know.
bang, bang.
Right.
The officer that found the shells at first swore that he put his initials on the shells. That's police procedure. And then during the Warren Commission, they produced these shells that didn't have his initials. And he said, well, I guess I forgot. So
yeah,
there's these little things that make you wonder. Lee Harvey Oswald, another thing, at Atsuki, he got a case of syphilis. And that, during those days, that'd be grounds for being discharged, dishonorably discharged. He was given a pass because it said in his record, you can look this up, that he contracted this in the line of duty. What duty is that? Could this be infiltrating a communist cell within Atsuki, the city? There's just all these things that don't make sense.
I swear by ancient alien theorists. I'm so kidding. I am kidding. But they've got explanations for all this stuff.
Well, I know. You see these shows, and there's all these conspiracy theories. And I went into it with really an open mind. And the thing is, a lot of people don't look at Lee Harvey Oswald very quickly. He was a crazy nut. And it's all about, where did the shots come from, and the autopsy and all that. But if you look at the background of Lee Harvey Oswald, there's just a lot of crazy things.
What did Johnson do to try to dig up any evidence? What did he try to? Did he do an exhaustive search?
Well, he pressured the Warren Commission to get that report out before the election to smooth everything over. The Warren Commission was slapdash at best. 28 volumes, I got to tell you that, but there were certain witnesses they didn't call. There were people they told not to tell what they wanted to tell. And,
so when you're talking and you're lecturing, you say, well, it was the Warren Commission. Now, to your students, by the way, the Warren Commission was?
Right. It was the commission that President Johnson appointed to come to a conclusion as what happened here. Was it Lee Harvey Oswald, this crazy communist? Was there a conspiracy? And something that I should mention, one person that he appointed to the Warren Commission was Allen Dulles, who Kennedy fired. And Gerald Ford was on that commission, too. And
well, that's what I want.
And it was a rush job.
So how many people were part of the Warren Commission?
I think off the top of my head, I think there were about 9 different people. Now, I'm not saying that they were part of a conspiracy. I think that they were pressured to get this thing done.
And they had a history that wasn't necessarily on the positive scale.
No, and I think at the time it was framed as, we don't want to discover that it was the Soviets, because if we do that,
then we're into war.
We have a world war. So we want to smooth everything over, calm everybody down, and get back to normalcy.
So when we were originally talking, we were looking at well, we've got Cuba, we have the oil industry, we have CIA operatives, and but their big concern was the Soviets.
Right, communism.
And were they also part of this ring of corruption?
I think no. I think actually
Because they had cells in
since the Cuban Missile Crisis, actually the relations have gotten a little better. Because I think Khrushchev and Kennedy realized we almost had a nuclear war, and they established the hotline, and things were kind of cooling off a little bit. And maybe some people in America didn't like that. I don't know.
Right. Well, yeah, I think J. Edgar Hoover actually wrote a book called Masters of Deceit, and I don't know if it's even in print
Well, he
anymore.
was so obsessed with communism that he didn't even realize there was this whole organized crime thing that was bubbling up since Prohibition. You know, I think in the late '60s, after Appalachian, when they found the big meeting of all the mobsters, he finally couldn't deny it anymore. He said, "Oh, there's no organized."
Do you think there's organized crime still in politics?
I think politics is very corrupt today. I'm sorry.
I think
yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, I'm from Massachusetts.
Right?
We've had 3 speakers of the House that have been convicted of various felonies, and one is now under the microscope for doing more. And we just had a big scandal with the prison system, nepotism, and jobs for political favors and whatnot.
Right.
Yeah. It's I don't know how to stop it. This people talk about big business. Well, government is the biggest business, and that's where you can make a lot of money.
Well, that's what always seems to trouble me is when the government starts picking the winners and losers. That's really what cronyism is, and I wonder if people totally understand the ramifications for that. You know, if I were a teacher, I would probably go to the blackboard and I would say, okay, this is America. Here's the land of opportunity. And years ago, if you wanted to start a business, you created maybe like a little widget. And you were really good at that widget.
Yep.
And so you kept working hard, 24 hours a day. Sometimes you were, and you hired people. And they had made it. And then, of course, you got really prosperous. And then you got big. And then another person comes up with another idea that you get the wind of it. So what do? Instead of making it more competitive, you hire a lobbyist to make it illegal to be competitive. So you get bigger.
Sometimes I think the car industry is, I'll bet there's somebody that's come up with some kind of vehicle that doesn't have to.
The carburetor.
Yeah, it doesn't have to run on gasoline or what, but because the oil industry is so powerful.
Well, all the big industries.
I'm starting to sound like InfoWars now.
But the thing is people understand it, but they can't put their finger on it. And then you get some of the talk show hosts that poo-poo the conspiracies, and then some that just go full blown. You don't know if it's aliens, you don't know if it's conspiracies, and like we said earlier, the waters get muddied.
Right.
You put out so much information. Who are you going to believe? I don't care anymore. Let them all. In the meantime, there are consequences to this type of corruption. You undermine our Constitution, and when you undermine the Constitution, you really set back liberty. And when liberty is gone, is there any place in history where you get it back without bloodshed?
Well, history tells us that republics and democracies don't last too long.
400 years approximately is about the average.
Right.
And one of the things that people say over and over again, that the reason the Roman Empire, well, I still believe
there's a lot of parallels.
There are a lot of parallels, but it was due to the corruption in the Senate. It was due to the corruption and then Caesar took all power, and then a lot of egos, the armies, and they became divided. And what was once a great nation turned into a divided kingdom. Some people still think we're still living in a semblance of the Roman Empire.
I think the framers of the Constitution, they were well-educated men. They knew the history of Rome. They knew their own history, and they developed the Constitution to try to protect against those things. That's if honest men implement the Constitution the way it's supposed to be.
What do you think of the History Channel? I was just watching an episode on Benjamin Franklin. My wife, what are you watching?
Sounds like
right? I want to watch American Ninja Warrior or something like that. But I just love watching the History Channel, and sometimes I get a little angry because I think, nah, that doesn't sound right. But I was watching a series on Benjamin Franklin, and there was a pivotal point where he was still at one point a British subject. Yeah. and loyal all the way. And
They all were. Yeah.
And it got to the point where he was before the Parliament, and they were yelling at him. And there was a point where he turned. He walked in a British subject, and then he walked out a revolutionary. Because
John Adams was a lot like that too. They all were like
it's
that.
interesting. It's not like it happened overnight. There was a series of events, and when you read the preamble to the Constitution, they were bringing their grievances, but to no avail. And it was like, you know, in the story of Moses and the deliverance from Egypt.
Yeah.
It reminded me of that because as Moses was going to Pharaoh, if you will, Pharaoh said no, and then, you know, take away the straw or whatever, you know, make the work harder, make it harder and harder, and that's what the king was doing. They said, well, enough of this.
It has the opposite effect, actually.
But just get you ticked off. So you're going to be lecturing some more.
Yes, I lecture all over New England. I have a website, daileyhistory.com, and usually my busy time is in the fall and in the spring. So right now, it's kind of quiet, but I'll ramp it up in September and October.
So you have a little place up here in New Hampshire, and
Yep, I have a seasonal campsite up in Thornton, and
nice.
we love it up there on the Pemmy River.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Pemmy River is nice and slow.
Yeah. Well, this spring it was pretty quick. I guess there was a lot of snow this year, and
doesn't that go right through Franklin too?
Yeah, I think it does.
Yeah.
Franklin. Yeah.
I used to kayak up there, and it was just as slow and.
It's nice. You can go tubing, you can go kayaking. It's really
goes right into the
beautiful.
Kentucky River or Merrimack River. Eventually, it goes into the Merrimack.
Mm-hmm.
Nice to go up there. Beautiful area.
Yeah, in the White Mountains.
It's New Hampshire is great. But so you have a little place up here. You teach during the.
Yeah, I teach Silver Lake Regional, which is in Kingston, Massachusetts. Which, for people that don't know Mass, it's right next to Plymouth. Everybody knows Plymouth. And I actually teach world history, the fall of Rome till Napoleon. So I don't get into Kennedy and the Constitution. Years ago, I did teach Constitution. But now, they changed my curriculum on me.
Love you to come back. I got one more minute left, but maybe we could talk about the 14th Amendment or all 27 of them. Most people don't know there are 27 amendments.
No. And that's how you change the Constitution. If you don't like it, change it.
So
it's
again,
very difficult, though.
What is your website again?
It's daileyhistory.com, DALEY, history.com. It's really easy. Or you can just Google my name.
This show went too quick. I love history. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that's it for now. Thank you for watching Gate City Chronicles. Check out the website if you're a history buff. I think you're going to enjoy it. Gate City Chronicles has been sponsored by Aardvark, the Dean of Clean, a local carpet cleaning here in Nashua, New Hampshire. You can contact them at 521-7657. Thank you.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.